Hi, welcome to this week's episode of The Pulse, Regen Strategic's policy and political podcast. Delighted once again to be joined by Libby Lyons. And today we're hosting Isaac Hinton, who is Head of Australia for InterContinental Energy. InterContinental Energy has two very large projects on plan for Australia, the Australian Renewable Energy Hub in the Pilbara and the Western Green Energy Hub in the southeast corner of WA. We'll obviously unpack what those projects aim to do, their current status and what Isaac sees as the future for clean energy and Australia's trading relationships through those projects. But Libby, I might hand to you. We've got a couple of questions on Isaac's background that we thought would be worth just probing to him, and we'll get the ball rolling.
Well, Isaac and I, we've caught up with each other along the way over the years, but you spent a lot of time and you have a lot of experience from BHP, from Santos, going back to your Deloitte days as well. What least prepared you for joining InterContinental Energy and leading the Australian Renewable Energy Hub?
Thanks, Libby, and thanks, Patrick, for this opportunity. Really good question. I think, let me think about what helped me prepare, and I'll sort of then go in reverse order. So I think attention to detail at some of these companies is just so important in everything you're looking at. I think at Santos, thinking about what they were trying to do of huge scale with the LNG industry they were looking to do in Queensland. And at BHP, I think they really, and I'm really proud to say, they take quite a holistic approach to what they do in their industry. And I'm not talking about just profits, it's about social value was a big thing. Probably what least prepared me, I think, was the amount of interfaces and complexities that I often didn't see in my roles. So, for example, I thought this was as easy as just getting the engineering together, getting the costs down, and then finding those customers. But the reality is, building a project in Australia at the moment is incredibly difficult. There is so much regulation in place. The standard of environmental scrutiny has risen, which is a good thing. Those interfaces between all of these, not even 5 or 6 segments, but I'd say 50 sub areas, and that interrelation. Building in the Pilbara, for example, is incredibly complex because there's so much there. But those things, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's what we're uncovering still, especially in a nascent industry like renewable hydrogen. Going
back to that red tape, do you find, and interesting to get your view on this, particularly as that was the area you felt you were least prepared. So coming into it as sort of with a new set of eyes and a new focus, do you think that there is a lot of duplication, particularly between, for instance, federal legislation, state legislation, and even local government rules and bylaws and things like that?
The simple answer is yes, there are. And as I said, I always think it's important to stop and think, what are we solving for with having regulation in place? As I said, from an environmental perspective, unfortunately, the extractive industries before us, oil and gas and areas of mining, have not taken that seriously. So now we as a society and us even as a renewable energy need to think about that. But there are significant duplication in some of these regulations. Federally and at the state level, we are very proud at Western Green Energy Hub to have submitted 70 gigawatts, I should say, 70, that's a big number, of environmental approval for that project. And the questions we're coming back are almost the same, but the way we need to answer them is quite different. So it creates a lot of costs for us. These are some of the complexities I didn't understand, coming in, the regulatory areas of government, of environment, which is why we have, fantastic advisors and consultants helping us along the way.
But as you say, the cost to your organisation, when you need every cent you can for research and all the other things you need to do, it can be at times prohibitive, particularly for smaller projects. And I think this is always, I've said this often and I continue to say it, I think at times we're over-regulated, and that lack of consultation between state and federal governments when it comes to regulation really concerns me, and I think it's something that does impede business and hamper development and research. And
well, for us, we look at the cost, as you mentioned there, the cost. So we pay roughly 25% of our annual budgets to license fees, to maintaining regulations, to reporting requirements, and we're not even we haven't producing anything yet. So that just gives you a bit of a flavour. Now, luckily we have the scale, and we've got a fantastic investor group that sees the long-term potential. But I think I'm worried for smaller projects and just smaller business. That if they had to incur 25% of their cost base, that's a lot of margin and upside that it would make it difficult to sustain some of these opportunities.
Yeah. So just taking a step back, you mentioned what are we solving for with regard to regulation. I guess taking a view on your projects, so Australian Renewable Energy Hub and then Western Green Energy Hub in terms of where they fall on your development schedule, what's the vision? What are they both being designed to facilitate for WA, for Australia, for InterContinental Energy?
So maybe I'll just talk about the ultimate goal of these is to produce Australian Renewable Energy Hub. It's 26 gigawatts of energy potential. The Western Green Energy Hub is 70 gigawatts, so roughly 100 gigawatts of energy potential. Now, a lot of people don't understand, well, how much energy is that? Yep. And if I was to summarise that, if you looked at all the energy generation in Australia at the moment, coal, gas, wind, solar, hydro, for example, it's the equivalent to the amount of energy generation that is currently in place in Australia today. Mm-hmm. That is what we're looking to do, effectively double what we're generating in Australia. The difference with our projects is looking at taking that renewable energy source and thinking about what is the best way to use that energy in what we believe is the best renewable energy zones in Australia. We pick these areas very specifically, and we can talk about that later if you like, because it's more than just the energy spots itself. It's the social environment, community, etc. And what we want to do with that is effectively think about the fact that this world needs so much more energy in the future to transition not just away from fossil fuels, but just the demand for energy itself is increasing. So we've always believed that using these zones to produce hydrogen, that is wind and solar and water, using electrolysis to produce hydrogen, we can create new industry. And in the case of the Pilbara, it's thinking about the opportunity to produce green iron, which is a huge strategic opportunity for the country. Western Green Energy Hub, creating a new export pathway for ammonia, which we produce from hydrogen and nitrogen in the air. So that's ultimately creating this new industry, diversifying the economy of the state. At the same time, decarbonising the Pilbara is a massive opportunity. 41% of the emissions of Western Australia come from the Pilbara. So in terms of the objectives of the state, diversification and decarbonisation are two massive opportunities, and we're very proud to think that these are completely aligned to that.
Hydrogen and its many derivatives, it's been subject to a lot of speculation and changes and shifts in perception within media. There's been probably a variety of views that you must sort of sit back and think, where did they get some of those assumptions
Some
from?
are quite interesting, yes.
Yeah, so from, I guess, inside out, because you are in the driving seat for this new sector, what are your perceptions of the way in which some of those changes in the framing of the industry have occurred recently?
Yeah. It is interesting because I've been at InterContinental Energy for 3 years. There was this concept, then there was this huge hype. Some of the competitors we saw were claiming outlandish amounts of production in an incredibly short space of time. And even we thought that was just not helpful. And now we've gone to, I think, a position of reality. But just to put things in context, I mean, InterContinental Energy as a company has only been around for 10 years. The thinking of the Australian Renewable Energy Hub as a hydrogen-focused energy development has probably only happened in 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So when you put all that in perspective, it's a relatively short and nascent opportunity that's been thought about. And I go into the historical context. I think about the LNG industry in Western Australia in the 70s.
Yep.
And there was a huge amount of scepticism. I mean, we got all this gas up in the Northwest Shelf. Who's going to use it? You know, in Perth, we were. I'm not West Australian, so I'm guessing you used whale fat or something here. No disrespect to your listeners, but South Australia, we did have natural gas actually in the 70s as well. But in Western Australia, there was a lot of scepticism of this LNG industry. You know, iron ore was a concept first thought about in the 60s. It didn't actually happen to really find its feet until the 90s. When we leveraged this and created new trading relationships. So when I think about some of the scepticism of hydrogen in this really short spirited pace of time, I think it's well considered and it's appropriate to challenge. But you know, solar was also thought about 15 years ago was incredibly expensive, and now it's 1% of the cost it used to be.
Yep.
So I put all that into perspective. I think after 6 years, we as a company have done huge progress in some of the things we've done, and there's still a long way to go. I just think patience is required.
So a lot of hydrogen projects do struggle. You've admitted that, and especially when they're trying to move from concept to scale. What is InterContinental Energy doing that's different?
Sure, yes, and that's exactly what we're trying to do is be different. I mean, the first thing that we believe is scale. To get ultimately it's about cost, okay? Governments need to do more, and I've got some thoughts on that. But at the end of the day, industry need to solve the cost gap. Consumers, as much as they all want environmental sustainability and manage carbon emissions, we also need to think about the financial sustainability of our society. So cost has to come down. What we're trying to do is bring scale to the game. So just like the iron ore projects and oil and gas projects that are around the world, again, I hate using fossil fuel examples, but that's the only ones we've got to work with, is that your cheapest mine or your cheapest oil field is the one that you built right next to the one you did before. And that's exactly what we're thinking about these projects, is scale, you build them up over time. But also the engineering we've done. So we've got this engineering design called the P2H2 node. And I'm not going to get too technical about it, but think of a Lego block. I was about to say Lego because that's, again, an Adelaide term. But Lego block.
Stovey poles.
Yeah, Stovey poles, or looking at another podcast.
Faulkner footies.
Yeah.
We're free settlers, in Adelaide.
That's right. But we digress. So the P2H2 node is akin to a Lego, piece of Lego. It's a very standard size. It's got the little things on top. It's got little inserts at the bottom. You have different colors, you have different shapes, but ultimately this engineering, it's a piece of engineering. It is replicable, it's expandable, it's scalable. The P2H2 node seeks to put wind and solar as efficiently and close together as possible to the hydrogen electrolyzer system and avoid all the complications of electricity networks, of grids, of transmission lines, where you could lose 10 to 20% of your electricity. Mm-hmm. And we take that energy from the electrical, we bring in the water, we produce the hydrogen, and then we export the molecule, which, again, you can store molecules, you can store hydrogen, you can store natural gas. You can't store electricity unless it's through batteries. So we're taking this approach of an engineering. How do you engineer and optimize something that you can build over and over again and bring the cost down as you're learning? That's effectively what we're trying to do differently, and being very open to new technology as it evolves. Another innovative aspect of the way we're thinking about our projects, apart from the engineering designs we've been talking about, is the way we're trying to bring in traditional owners into the projects. Western Green Energy Hub, the first of its kind, we believe, in Australia, we've actually offered them 10% equity into the project. And they have that now, and they don't pay anything for that. We pay their bills of their 10% share until an investment decision in the future. but it gives them a real understanding of the complexities of working in this project. The Merning people have this ownership via their subsidiary Merning Green Energy Limited.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, they have a board member on the project. They also have the option to buy back 50% of the project after 50 years for $50. So we've taken a very, very different view to how we bring in traditional owner participation. It is not just through financial payments or simple jobs, but really thinking about how do we help get them involved early to have a much greater say in how this project's developed over decades.
Yeah, fantastic.
It is fantastic and a great model for other organisations, particularly organisations that are setting up, to look at and use as an example.
That's right. I think for us, it doesn't impact the economics at all. In fact, probably helps. We had a lot of investors overseas. They're looking at investment in Australia and they're quite concerned about, there is no land use agreement or they don't see any interaction with traditional owners, where we can point to some of the things we've done at both of our projects and feel very proud about that.
Well, that certainly sets you apart.
Yeah, it takes it well beyond transactional.
Yes, exactly. A partnership mindset is what we try to take with everyone we work with.
Can I go to the business about trying to produce green iron? Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. I mean, I think there are so many opportunities in Australia for manufacturing, something that we've moved drastically away from in the last 4 or 5 decades. But what part of that transition to green iron is, in your view, the most underestimated? Obviously, we need to get green energy and whatever, but what's the most underestimated part of that?
In terms of going from exporting just normal iron to green iron?
Well, we don't really export iron, So
no, we just
need to start manufacturing iron.
Yes.
So what in your view, what part of that's the most underestimated? I mean, clearly we need the energy, as I've said, but there are other hurdles that we've got to we've got to jump there as well, I would imagine.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the cost of the hydrogen into the inputs into producing direct reduced iron for iron export as opposed to iron ore, obviously that's the challenge. The energy input is important, as we said. But in terms of some of the other things, the technology itself is still emerging. In direct reduced iron around the world, I think roughly equates to about 2 to 3% of iron production. Mm-hmm. The remaining 97% is using essentially coal and iron ore through a blast furnace. So there's a technology challenge just even using direct reduced iron. Don't even worry about hydrogen if it's natural gas. That in itself, there's a technology and efficiency challenge, which the world's are trying to overcome with new technologies. Interestingly, in the Pilbara, there's another metallurgical issue which is emerging, and there's 2 sort of main types of iron ore. There's hematite and magnetite. Hematite is the most well-known product that's put out of the Pilbara. There is a lot of magnetite in the Pilbara, and the mining companies have reserves of it. It's just that they've prioritised their mine plans around hematite, except for a few.
It's easier to process.
Much easier to process.
And cheaper.
Much cheaper. As I said, it's very compatible with all these blast furnaces around the world. Magnetite, you're right, you have to do a lot of beneficiation, cleaning, scrubbing. However, from a iron making process with direct reduce, it is perfect. It's called magnetite for a reason because it's magnetic. It literally, with hydrogen, separates from a magnetic reaction. So that's a huge challenge for us as well. Not to mention, the logistics of moving iron as opposed to iron ore.
But it's also a huge opportunity, particularly with all the magnetite reserves that I used to work for an organisation that mined magnetite. That's why I know a little bit about it. But it is our opportunity. It is an amazing opportunity, and that's where we can do the real value add, I think, as a country.
That's right.
But we just need the smart engineering solutions.
Yes, and there's some great reserves of magnetite in Australia. I mean, South Australia, again, I keep coming back to South Australia, but I'm firmly a West Australian.
You know it well. Yeah.
Yes. Huge reserves of magnetite that have been largely undeveloped.
And in New South Wales.
New South
funnily
Wales,
enough.
the Midwest here in Western Australia, some very good
exactly.
magnetite reserves.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, opportunity and challenge for the industry, and the Pilbara in particular.
Yeah. So you can't move faster than your customers or your intended customers. You talked about, I guess, one avenue for AREH, Australian Renewable Energy Hub. I'll avoid the acronyms for the listeners as much as possible.
It's a long word.
It
so
certainly
I
is.
know.
Yeah. You've talked about the use of hydrogen to support downstream processing within Australia. For exports of hydrogen derivatives, less so hydrogen itself, what are you observing within Asia, within Europe, with some of those potential customers for your two projects?
Sure. So as I said, the Australian Renewable Energy is focused on predominantly green iron, but it's such a huge project. It's not to say, the next phase of it couldn't be to produce, say, ammonia for export, for example. And Western Green, as I said, mainly ammonia. But the main, I guess, if I think about ammonia, the reason we're quite focused on ammonia is, one, it's very easy to transport. It's already one of the most transported products around the world behind, coal, behind oil and gas, behind iron ore. Very well traded already. We import, export ammonia.
So an existing market.
Exactly. So it's an existing market. It also has a number of uses, fertilizers, explosives. The new ones are like power generation. So using it to co-fire into coal-fired power plants in Japan. Japan are already progressing, some of their coal-fired power plants, 20% blending of ammonia. The shipping industry is really a huge opportunity to decarbonise the world, and they're thinking about clean fuels. And methanol is another clean fuel you could use from the use of hydrogen. You need a carbon source to produce with that, whereas ammonia is another sort of shipping fuel. And some amazing West Australian companies. Fortescue have been a huge pioneer, and we're so proud to see what they're doing in terms of ammonia for shipping. But that could be a huge opportunity as well. Liquid hydrogen is another one. It's kind of like think of liquefied natural gas. It's liquid hydrogen. There's a lot of interest in Japan on that because you can then use it straight into gas turbines. The problem with liquid hydrogen is you need a lot of energy to keep it cool and liquefied. LNG you do too, but for liquid hydrogen it's a factor of 10.
Yes.
What you do with LNG. So there's that energy loss there as well. But if I go back to the shipping example, to decarbonise half of the shipping industry, you would sell out our portfolio 5 times.
Right.
So again, the fundamentals of energy transition, it makes our portfolio look small in 50 years' time. So quite an exciting opportunity if you think of it like that.
Yeah. And the drive for ammonia blending in coal-fired generation or substitution for existing shipping fuels, take our listeners through, say, the magnitude of benefit from an emissions point of view.
Sure. So if I think about, as I said, I talked about the Pilbara. There's 41% emissions reductions for the state. With shipping, shipping largely accounts for about 8 or 9% of global emissions. So you think about what, as I said, you sold out all of the Western Green Energy Hub for that. It could, reduce emissions just with that project alone by 1.5%, if my maths is serving me correctly on the fly.
Yeah.
You can test me after. So, and in terms of power generation from coal, that's a significant emitter. You replace ammonia, so 20% ammonia into a coal-fired power station. You're reducing the emissions there by a factor of probably 30-40%, just because the way it works, you get a better return on reductions of emissions by using ammonia higher than the use of ammonia itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they're some of the main areas. But again, I come back to iron if I could. When you produce steel, when you produce the iron that goes into steel, that's about 80% of the emissions from the whole value chain. Us doing that we used all of AREH to do 5% green iron in the Pilbara. That would remove all of West Australia's emissions, would offset it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So huge opportunity from a climate adaptation perspective.
If you look at your two projects, Western Green and Australian Renewable Energy Hub, what does success look like in 5 years' time?
So the success for these two projects is getting to a financial investment decision by the end of this decade. And we've got another project in Oman. It's very similar, completely different regulatory environment, which is a little bit easier.
Fabulous country.
Yes, it is. It's like going to a movie set of Aladdin.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
But no, to start construction, I think by the end of this decade, we want an investment decisions at the Australian Renewable Energy Hub in 2028. And what I mean by an investment decision is you have your customers in place, you have your costs confirmed, you have the financing of the project, and you have all the regulatory approvals completed. Those things we want done by the end of the decade for both projects.
And then what are the projections for workforce requirements, skilled labour? I mean, I imagine there's an enormous opportunity, a challenge of course, but there's an enormous opportunity that these sectors can fuel a new wave of sustainable economic growth for Australia.
Yeah, that's right. And we talked about diversification and decarbonisation as supporting the pillars of the state and the nation, but there are a lot of jobs will be required here as well.
Sure.
We're sort of thinking around 3,000, a workforce of 3,000 for Western Green Energy Hub, maybe 2,000 at the Australian Renewable Energy Hub. But it's a different type of workforce than, say, when a new mine gets developed or a new oil field gets developed. Typically, you would bring in 1,000-person workforce, for 4 or 5 years to build this thing.
Scale up.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them disappear.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredibly hard for regional centres to manage that.
Yep.
So we're sort of trying to take a view that we want to create much more sustainable communities around this, because we're going to be building these projects for 25 to 30 years. It's going to take that long to build them out to its full potential. Maybe quicker if technology improves, but that's our base case.
Sure.
But once you do that and you do 20 to 25 years, the first project you built 20 years ago will need to start being refurbed and maintained and maybe adjustments made.
So going back to that Lego block,
yes,
you're returning to the first Lego block you constructed.
Right. Well, the analogy I use is the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Yes.
So you start painting it.
Yeah.
And then in 2 or 3 years' time, you finish painting it, you go back to the start. It's a very sustainable workforce.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're thinking about our projects. It has a level of stability for workforce and skilled work.
That's music to my ears, because I worry about FIFO workers. I worry about the impact it has on families and children and partners and the community in general. So building communities that are sustainable, I think, around those projects is really, really important for our community as a whole. And it's sort of partly, I think, will answer my next question, because large infrastructure projects often talk about diversity and, in terms of its workforce, gender, disability, ethnicity, all of those sorts of things. But we know that in reality, pressure can often erode that intent. So I suppose as your projects scale up, how will you ensure that diversity and inclusion just don't go by the by because of speed and pressure, the need for speed and pressure on costs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, InterContinental Energy are a relatively small workforce, and made a very good observation that of our leadership team of 6, we have 1 woman. So it's not lost on us on the importance to think about this. As a company already, though, we have an incredible gender balance. We've got many religions covered. We've got neurodivergent people. So we're really proud of that, what we've done already. But thinking about the future, as I said, the ability to have a sustainable workforce kind of helps enable that gender balance and providing work to people who not as strong as they could be to lift up, huge spanners like they would have to when they're fitting a truck or anything like that. So it allows the environment, facilitates more, willingness for people who might not look at this industry as a place for them. At the same time, I think the technology is improving so quickly that a lot of the skills, Patrick, you mentioned before about skilled workers, we won't need people in the middle of the desert sort of tightening, screws and spanners and things. It'll be people understanding the technology, electrical technicians, things that you can do that don't require you to be so manual and maybe not as able to do some of those skills. So there's a combination of the work itself that will allow it, the workplace being much more inviting, and the community to be more sustainable.
And I think too, as you say, if you're looking to build those sustainable communities around your projects, then your workforce will, by sheer dint of the fact that you're working from a particular pool, will look more like and reflect the community in which you operate.
Absolutely. No, absolutely right. I mean, we would love to remove as much FIFO from our operations as possible in the future, subject to the community's aspirations of township and also the traditional owners. It's very important they're part of the the planning. At Western Green Energy Hub and the Merning, they're a huge part of the way we're looking at building town and community. But that's the intent is to remove this requirement for fly in, fly out and impacting families.
Yeah. And I suppose the time frame that you're talking about with development of these projects, the repeatable nature, I mean, even the P2H2 node, the optimisation and the way in which that's changed in a relatively short space of time indicates the level of innovation that you can start to breathe into the project's development.
That's right.
You've got 25 years to continually tinker with the way in which it's built out.
Yes, yeah. Again, if you had have asked people 15, 20 years ago, everyone have solar panels on their house, I should say, people would think you're crazy. Like me 20 years ago about solar, there'd be a lot of scepticism. I mean, let's fast forward 20 years' time and to see if we can create new industry. West Australia has done it in the past before. This government's super motivated and willing to sort of offer or talk about making this happen. So in our view, there's not without challenges. I'm not saying it's not hard, very complex, but it's certainly looking, the future remains really positive for us and our investors.
Yeah. AREH, just to finish, we should round out with some really recent news. So it's been the recipient, Australian Renewable Energy Hub, has been the recipient of a grant from ARENA, so the Australian Renewable Energy Agency at a federal government level. That's a really significant event, milestone on that project's pathway. What do you envisage that will enable, and what are you thinking about as the big milestones for this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to start the year, isn't it? I mean, Christmas came late, but it came. No. So the Australian Renewable Energy Agency has been a fantastic supporter of us and our projects. So the $21 million grant that the Australian Renewable Energy Agency has given us was to sort of two things. One is progress the engineering to a relatively high level, almost to front-end engineering for the renewables part at the Australian Renewable Energy Hub. And it's quite important we do that and want to share some of the learnings because renewables hasn't really been deployed very successfully in the Pilbara to this point. Yeah. 2% of the energy generation is renewables. I'm sure you probably thought it was more than that. So that's a large part, is to sort of work on the engineering. The other part is to, do the feasibility study for hydrogen at Port Hedland. Okay. And work with our potential partners that are looking at building green iron projects as to how we connect that fuel source to their projects. And again, sort of share some of those learnings of the complications and opportunities of building relatively large-scale hydrogen. So huge vote of confidence for us. Our investors would be very excited to see that the government is putting direct investment into our industry, because that has been a concern, I think, internationally, that a lot of projects in Australia in the renewable space, not just hydrogen, they're not getting the investment from Australians, so why should they? So seeing the government take action like this is a really positive in many ways.
Yeah, congratulations. That's as you said, great way to start the year.
Thank
or
you.
end the year from last year.
Early Easter present, perhaps.
Well, that's true.
Maybe.
Yeah. Very friendly Easter bunny.
Thanks for your time. We'll no doubt have you back in here again several times over the course of 25 years. And all the best for the year.
Thank you so
really
much,
appreciate
both
it.
of you. Thank you.
I think it's really important, and it's such an exciting time. So
Crest
we
of a
will
wave.
keep up to date, Isaac, because I think our listeners will want to know how you're going as well.
Great. No, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Libby.
Thanks, Pat.
See you next time.
Yep.